Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Born with a Forbidden Quirk? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Panting breath, rustling grass, loud thumping of feet, quiet whistle of gentle wind, panicked eyes. A young woman ran past trees looming down on her, the cool air of the night nipping at the exposed skin on her arms as she held her child in her arms. The child was unconscious, a small trail of blood trickling from his forehead, a mop of unruly hair pushed against her chest. A loud yell from behind made the woman push her legs to move faster, nearly tripping over an overgrown root. Orange light from torches slowly appeared in her peripheral vision as she quickly ducked behind a particularly large tree. Where did that witch go? They're not over here. It seems we've chased them far enough. They won't be able to survive by themselves out here. Let's go. The voices died away as the orange light slowly faded. The woman held her breath, waiting for a few more moments just to make sure before peeking out. Upon seeing nothing but forest, she exhaled, looking down at her child. The boy still slept, unaware of what was going on. She forced a small smile on her lips, kissing his cheek. "Don't worry, sweetie, Mommy won't let them hurt you. Mommy will take care of you." With that, she got up and continued into the forest, disappearing into the thick of the night. The woman stumbled into a small clearing in the middle of the woods, exhaustion clear on her face. She had been looking for a place to make home, unable to sleep at night besides a few hour naps here and there. Looking around, she was glad to find that the clearing was protected by thick brush and bushes, the trees covering what the other greenery couldn't. She looked down at her child. He had not woken up yet, to which she made sure, Haven given him certain berry juices to make sure he sleeps, because she knows he needs it. Setting him down under the shadow of a tree, she got up and dusted herself off. Her kimono was torn and stained with mud, and some dirt snuck its way deeply into the veins of the clothing. She sighed quietly before looking around, quickly making her way to a large stick. Brushing off the stray leaves, she examined it and picked it up, testing its weight. Happy with it, she pulled out a rock she had sharpened along the way to cut through tough vines and other things. With another quick look around, she quickly cut a vine from a tree and used it to tie the rock to the stick, giving it a few test swings once finished. A smile crept across her face, satisfied with her work. Before she could get to work, a quiet groan made her head whip around. The child grumbled in his sleep, turning the opposite way, his back to her. She let out a small sigh along with a small smile before turning back and going to work. The day passed as she worked, gathering food and working on a small home for the two. Of course, all she could gather for their home was a few sticks and whatever she could rip from the surrounding trees. Placing the fruits she'd managed to collect in her small food pile, she took another look at her child. Despite all odds, he was still asleep, mumbling to himself as he always did. Moonlight slowly trickled into the small clearing, and the woman looked up, staring at the beautiful sight of the large orb in the sky. She clasped her hands together, closed her eyes, and began to pray. "Dear Lord, wherever you might be, I beg of you. I'm not stupid. I know I can't build a home by myself. At least, not one that would be made before my son is old enough to live by himself. Please, I ask you only for this one thing, give my son a home." She opened her eyes and walked over to the sleeping child, ignoring the way her feet stung from the constant walking without any sort of footwear. She also ignored the small trail of blood her feet left as she walked. That was not important. Giving her child a place to live, a place where he could feel safe. That was the only thing that mattered. The woman lay next to him, wrapping her arms around him, basking in his warmth. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to finally fall asleep. A miracle. That was the only word she could describe this as. She stared at the structure in front of her in awe as her child finally awoke, rubbing his eyes sleepily. He looked up at her, sleep heavy in his voice. "Mom?" She looked down at him, her face shadowing the light from the rising sun as tears rolled down her cheeks. A smile crossed her face as she motioned to the small house in front of them. "We're home." A cool breeze shuffles the leaves atop the trees. Thin streams of light trickle down from the small openings the forest's top gave, dotting the ground below. Animals pranced around, carefree and relaxed. A quiet rustle in the distance alerts a deer, whose head perks up, ears twitching slightly. The animal relaxed when a familiar figure made its way out of a bush. Fluffy green hair had leaves and twigs jutting out in all directions, emerald green eyes full of excitement as the child stumbled forward. The deer went on with its day, content with letting the small human rush by. Running past thick brush and weaving around trees, the child made his way to a meadow. He then stopped, gasping for air, eyes still full of childish wonder. He plopped down, letting the soft winds cool down his heated skin. Just as he closed his eyes, relaxing, a loud, thunderous voice called out, "Oi, Deku, you useless fucker! Where'd you go?" Sighing, he got up, brushing dirt from his shorts as another child made their way over. The other had ash-blonde hair and blood-red eyes, a scowl etched onto his face. "Don't run off like that, face. What would I tell Auntie if your dumbass got mauled by a bear or something?" The boy said, looking annoyed. "Sorry, Kaken, but..." Izuku started, shuffling his feet. But you promised you'd take me to town today, so I just couldn't help myself." The blonde huffed. "Yeah, I know, but knowing your dumbass, you'd wind up dead if you went by yourself. So, stop running off and just let me lead the way, damn it." Izuku gave him a small, apologetic smile. It's been 6 years since he and his mother had left their village, and the green-haired child had only gotten to know Katsuki 4 years ago. While the other had a brash attitude and foul mouth, he was the only friend Izuku had. Not only that, but he knew the short-tempered boy was secretly nice behind his rude exterior. How they met was completely on accident too, as Izuku stumbled into the other's home, which was in a cave, and was nearly burnt alive by a dragon. If it wasn't for Katsuki, he was sure the dragon would have had crispy fried human for lunch that day. He seemed to have drifted into his thoughts as Katsuki literally had to smack him over the head to return his attention back to reality. "What were you thinking about, you DMN nerd?" The other snapped, glowering at him. Sorry, Kaken. I was just thinking about how we met." He apologized for at least the 5th time today. What for?" He shook his head. "You know what, never mind. Are you coming or not?" "Oh, of course." With that, the two set off, making their way out of the forest. Excitement tingled under his skin as he noticed the tree lines thinning out before greeted with the bright flash of the sun's light. The boy narrowed his eyes, a bit taken back by how bright the light above actually was. He'd only ever seen it in bits and pieces thanks to the forest roof. After letting his eyes adjust for a few moments, Izuku could hardly believe what he was seeing. Just outside the forest was a fairly large village, people walking the dirt streets as chatter echoed throughout. Wide green eyes surveyed the area, the excitement once again bubbling through his blood. He gave Katsuki a shy glance, and the other returned the look with a sly grin. "This is the outside world. Better make use of your time here before you have to go back." Izuku nodded mutely, unable to use his voice. After a few steps into the bustling town, Izuku suddenly felt a wave of anxiety take over him. He stuck close to Katsuki as they made their way through the crowded streets, and despite his newfound shyness, he couldn't help his curiosity as he saw street performers and stared at the weird trinkets inside stores through windows. The two spent most of their day in the village, and, unbeknownst to him, he had separated from Katsuki at some point, wandering through the bustling streets alone. "Hey, Kaken Dash," he started, turning around, expecting to see his blonde friend, but was surprised to find that he wasn't there. He looked around, confused. "Kaken?" Anxiety once again surged forward, making the small child tear up. He quickly rushed off, calling out to his childhood friend. He turned a corner and ran into someone, falling back and crashing onto the ground. "Hey kid, watch where you're going." The person chided, their voice annoyed. Sorry." He squeaked out, looking up to see a large man staring down at him, face scrunched up with annoyance. Letting out an eep, Izuku quickly got up and stepped out of the man's way, letting him by. When the other passed, he was able to see what the larger was blocking. A bloodied body lay on the ground, a small puddle of blood seeping into the dirt, staining it into a dark brown. His eyes widened as he rushed over, checking the other to see if they were still breathing. He let out a small sigh of relief as he noticed their chest rise and fall slightly, but his relief was quickly washed out as he looked around. Help! Somebody! Izuku cried out, watching as people just walked by. This person's seriously injured. A few people spared him a glance before continuing on, clearly ignoring his cries for help. The child's blood turned cold as he continued to ask, to beg, for help, only for it to fall of deaf ears. He was about to go into a full-out panic attack when he felt pressure on his shoulder, making him jump out of his skin as he turned around. He didn't know quite what he was staring at. The person before him was covered in purple mist, yellow eyes protruding from where the head should be. "Hello, young one," a deep voice greeted him. "I noticed you found my young master. Would you mind helping me carry him home?" Without even thinking about it, Izuku nodded quickly. He wanted this person to be helped quickly. The other nodded, or, at least, Izuku thinks it was a nod, picking up the smaller body. How were they able to do that without any noticeable muscle? Before motioning for him to follow. Throat dry, Izuku followed, worried for the injured person as he followed the mist being through a portal. There were many things in life Izuku was aware of. There was a circle of life, where some animals needed to hunt other animals to survive. The sun would always rise as the moon set, and vice versa. However, one thing that he didn't seem to know was that humanity could be cruel, inhumanely so. As he stepped through the portal, he was met with wooden walls and flooring, barely catching himself from tripping due to the sudden rise of ground. Letting out a small huff of relief that he didn't fall on his face, he looked around. The mist person set the body on a bed near the wall on the opposite side, and Izuku hurried over, finally getting a good look at what the person actually looked like. They were smaller than the mist being, with shaggy white hair covering their face, which looked worn and tired. They had a long-sleeved black shirt which was stained with blood and had multiple holes in it, as well as their pants. "It seems we made it just in time," the other said, their voice calm and even. "He'll be just fine after we clean him up." "So he's a boy," Izuku hummed in response, worry still etched on his face. "Ah, how rude of me. I have yet to introduce myself." They turned, bowing slightly to him. "My name is Kurojairi, and this here is Shigaraki Tamura. We're in your debt." He quickly shook his head. "No, it's fine. I really didn't do much." "Nonsense," Kurojairi interrupted, wetting a cloth in a bowl of water. "Where did those even come from?" before going to wipe blood off of Shigaraki's body. "You came to his aid when no one else would. That is more than enough for us to be indebted to you." Not trusting his voice at the moment, he just nodded, watching as the other cleaned their acquaintance. The way Kurojairi spoke of him didn't make it seem like they were friends. As the mist being rolled the other boy's shirt up, Izuku forced himself to swallow the bile that threatened to rise up his throat. Scars littered the tattered body, bone poking at the skin with how thin he was. That wasn't the worst part, open wounds accompanied the scars, a handful of bruises turning purple. Some of the wounds wept pus as well as blood, and Izuku looked away, unable to stomach looking at the sight in front of him for much longer. Kurojairi seemed to notice as he hastened his cleaning slightly, pulling down Shigaraki's shirt as soon as he was done. Izuku examined the room, still not able to look at the injured boy. The room was decent in size, though definitely bigger than Izuku and his mother's room combined. Despite its size, the room wasn't furnished with much. The only things in it were a bed, a nightstand, and a closet. Izuku frowned. Why was this room so empty? His eyes landed back on Shigaraki, who looked marginally less bloody than before. Kurojairi let out a quiet sigh, setting the towel he used to clean the blood off in the bowl of water, the clear liquid slowly turning a saturated red. He quietly shuffled over, eyeing the other boy with worry. "Well, we've done what we can at the moment," Kurojairi stated, casting a glance at the green-haired boy. "We'll just have to wait until Sensei comes back." "Sensei? He's the one who looks over us. He has a healing magic of sorts that can help Shigaraki Tamura." He gave a quiet hum in response, eyes never leaving the injured party. The elder stared at Izuku for a few moments, quiet and calculating, before deciding to speak. "Young man, do you have a moment? There is something I would like to discuss with you." "Okay." He followed the other to a different room, which was just as barren as the one before. Kurogiri stopped in the middle and turned around, staring down at the child. "First, I must ask you, are you planning on hurting Tamura, or leaking out information about us?" The question caught him off guard, wide, owlish eyes staring up in surprise. What? "Oh, of course not." A hum came from the other, seeming to contemplate what he said, examining the child for any indication of him lying. After a few terse minutes, he nodded, seemingly pleased with his answer. "Good. In case it wasn't too terribly obvious, the townspeople here do not appreciate us being here." "You're not doing anything wrong?" Izuku asked, confused. "Indeed, but people do not like things that are different. As you can see, I do not look human, but I assure you I am no different from you. Shigaraki Tamura is also subject to bullying, as he was born with magic that makes him turn whatever he touches to dust." Izuku blinked. "But that's not his fault. He couldn't help being born like that." Kurogiri chuckled quietly. "That may be true, but that does not stop others from seeing him as a monster." The child frowned. "That's not fair. They shouldn't judge you based on something you have no control over. Unfortunately, the world can be a cruel, unforgiving place," the elder sighed quietly, as if remembering an unseen memory. He shuffled slightly, not sure what to say. He opened his mouth but quickly closed it once he noticed the sun setting outside. "Oh no! I have to get back home." He hurried to the door, barely opening it before pausing, glancing back at the mist being. "Can I come back to check up on him?" Kurogiri stared at him in surprise. After a moment, Izuku heard a chuckle and was responded with, "But of course. I'm sure Tamura would appreciate seeing his savior for himself." Izuku blushed and nodded quickly, hurrying out of the house and into the streets. He turned around to find that there was nothing there. Confusion bubbled in his mind. Wasn't he just in a house? Before he could even attempt to find out what just happened, a hand slapped down on his shoulder, making him jump. He turned back around to see Katsuki, who was sweating and breathing heavily. "Deku, where the F were you? I was looking for you everywhere." He flinched at the other's tone. "Sorry, Kaken, I was just dash." "Whatever. It's getting late. Let's go back before Auntie has a panic attack." Katsuki grabbed his hand and began to drag him off. Sparing one last glance at where the house should have been, he swore he saw yellow eyes watching him being dragged off before disappearing into nothing. Thankfully, Izuku got home before his mother began to panic. She ushered him into his arms, nearly choking the life out of him. "Welcome home, sweetie," she said, kissing his forehead, smiling down at him. "I'm home." He stuttered shyly. "How was your day today?" "It was good. Kaken and I explored the forest a bit more, and we found a cave nearby." He told her. That part was true. He and Katsuki explored around a little bit before both went home. "Oh, that sounds exciting. Now come wash your face, dinner is ready." She chuckled, ruffling his hair softly before walking off. A smile played on his lips as he hurried to the bathroom, quickly splashing water on his face from the water bucket. He wiped his face off with his hands, his towel still needing to be washed, and he made his way to the kitchen. His house was quite small, most rooms connecting to one another without an actual door. Not that he really minded, it made it easier to get from the living room to the kitchen, which was also their dining room. Really, all they had was a small table with 2 chairs for them to eat on. Once again, Izuku didn't care. He had food and a roof over his head, so he couldn't really ask for more. He hoisted himself onto the chair he claimed as his from the beginning, swinging his short legs in anticipation as his mother placed a plate in front of him filled with fruits with a small side of soup. His eyes lit up. "Soup? It's been so long since we've had that." Inko chuckled softly. "It seems Yagi-san had a bit left over, so he gave me some." A low rumble erupted from his stomach, making him blush and his mom giggle. "Well, let's eat, shall we?" He nodded quickly and hurriedly began to eat. While he finished the fruit rather quickly, Izuku made sure to savor the soup for as long as he could. It's been years since he's had warm food. Despite living not too far from the town, Inko never went there, never really answering when he asked why. So, they got pretty much all of their food from the forest or from Yagi, who stumbled across their home while he was out on a journey. Inko and him hit it off quite well, the two becoming quick friends. Yagi would visit the two often, though Izuku knew he mainly came to see his mom. He read about love from a book Yagi gave him. So, in order to give the two as much time together, he'd always make up an excuse to leave and would usually spend the rest of the day with Katsuki. Apparently Izuku wasn't the only one who was curious about their current state of affairs, as he heard Yagi ask his mom why they didn't live in the village. The response he met with was, "We just prefer it out here. It's quieter and calming." He clearly didn't want to push it, so he left it at that. While Izuku was extremely curious as to why his mom never really talked about their life before living in the forest, he didn't want to upset her. He hated seeing her sad, the expression she would have one full of pain. At the last drop of soup, Izuku hopped off the chair and hurried to wash his plate. His mother smiled, watching him dip the metal into the water bucket and quickly cleaning it off. "I'm going to bed, Mom," he said, hurrying to his room, hearing his mother calling to him as he left. "All right, sweetie, sweet dreams." He smiled to himself and ran into his room, hopping onto his bed and snuggling under the sheets. His mind buzzed with his plans for tomorrow before the wind outside slowly lulled him to sleep. Leaves crunched underfoot as Izuku made his way to the forest's edge, a large smile on his face as he gasped for air. Once out, he narrowed his eyes from the sun's light and quickly made his way through the bustling crowds. Today he was visiting Kurojairi and checking to see if the other boy was all right. Excitement trilled in his veins, pushing through the masses of bodies. Due to the blaring sun and large sum of body heat, Izuku was uncomfortably hot and sweaty. He didn't like the feeling of strangers' skin brushing against his. It was gross. He hurried, looking around for the spot where he assumed the house was. After a few minutes of looking around, he nearly ran into a wall of a house that seemingly popped up out of nowhere. Letting out a small sigh of relief, he looked at the house to find it giving off a familiar feeling. This must be it. He quickly shuffled inside, shyly opening the door and closing it quietly. "Kei Kurojairi-san," he called out, not sure if he was allowed to go in any further. Mist floated out into the room, making him flinch slightly. After a few seconds, Kurojairi appeared, looking down at the young boy. "Hello there. Welcome back." Izuku blinked in surprise, not sure how to respond. "I'm back?" The other nodded, turning around before pausing midway. "Ah, how rude of me. I have yet to ask for your name." "I am Izuku. Midoriya Izuku," he said, giving a shy smile. "Midoriya?" Kurojairi repeated, slight surprise in his voice. "I see. How interesting." He tilted his head, confused. Was Midoriya a strange last name around here? "Okay. I'm sure you're curious to know how Tamura is coming along." Blinking, he smiled brightly and nodded, following the other into a different room. Upon entering, Izuku noticed that the previously injured boy was sitting up in bed, looking as if he hadn't suffered from any injuries at all. He smiled and rushed to the other's side. "Are you okay enough to be sitting up?" he asked worriedly. This question surprised the other boy, red eyes widening quite a bit. He gave Kurojairi a questioning look. "Kurojairi, who is this extra?" Kurojairi bowed slightly. "This is Midoriya Izuku. He is the one who saved you yesterday." "Midoriya?" Shigaraki echoed, having the same reaction to Izuku's last name as the other did. He looked back at the smaller child, eyeing him carefully. "You?" He looked up at him, blinking. "Yes. Why did you save me? You could have left me to die dash." "Of course I would save you." Izuku interrupted, frowning at the older boy, whose mouth snapped shut in surprised shock. No one deserves to die, especially in such a horrid fashion. The room grew quiet after the boy's outburst, no one really knowing what to say. Kurojairi glanced at Shigaraki in amusement while the other sent him a death glare. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the elder of the two children spoke up. All right. Sorry, I guess." Izuku smiled at him, eyes sparkling slightly. It's okay. I'm just glad you're okay. Shigaraki blushed slightly, and used to such attention, looking away, a strangled noise coming from his throat. Kurojairi watched the two in amusement, quite surprised that Izuku was able to hold a stable conversation with the latter, who was known to be quite temperamental. Shigaraki-kun, how old are you? 11. And don't call me Shigaraki-kun. It sounds weird. Then what should I call you? Anything other than that. Murakan. Shigaraki stared at him with wide eyes for a few seconds before looking away, a light blush spreading across his cheeks. Sure, whatever. The whole conversation was quite one to behold. Never before would Kurojairi have thought he'd see Shigaraki blush, but it was quite cute. It made him look more like the child he was. So Murakan is 3 years older than me? You're 8. Izuku smiled innocently at him. So is Kaken. Kaken? He's my best friend. Well, my only friend. I'm actually not supposed to be in town. Shigaraki raised an eyebrow. Oh, why not? I'm not too sure, he replied honestly, scratching his cheek lightly. But Mom told me not to ever come here. It seems like you didn't listen very well. But I was curious. The only things I heard about towns were things I read in a book and heard about from Kaken and Yagi-san. Izuku pouted. The white-haired child chuckled, the sound making Kurojairi do a double-take. Yeah. What is your relationship with Kurojairi-san? The green-haired child asked innocently, glancing between the two. Kurojairi. Shigaraki tilted his head back, scratching his neck. He's like my butler, I guess. So Kurojairi-san is male. Izuku glanced at the mist man. I guess it makes sense. He's wearing what looks like a bartender outfit that Yagi-san showed me. Noticing his intense stare, Kurojairi looked over at the child, who quickly looked away, embarrassed about his staring. He opened his mouth, about to say something else before the door flew across the room, narrowly missing Izuku by a few inches. He yelped, jumping and quickly turning to see what just happened. His eyes widened when he noticed a few grown men walk into the room, carrying bats and other blunt objects. Finally, we found you fuckers. One of them said, looking around, eyes landing on Izuku, who flinched. The kid. Don't he look familiar? One of the others turned their gaze to the child, frowning. Hey, ain't that the beach Midoriya's kid? Hey! Izuku snapped, glaring at them. Don't talk about my mom like that. So he is. Quite lucky today, aren't we? The largest one said, who seemed to be the boss, sauntering over to him. Esikas to be you, kid. Not only are you a Midoriya, but you're hanging around these outcasts? Seems like that beach didn't teach you anything. Before he could say anything else, pain erupted from his skull as a bat made contact, sending him straight to the ground. Izuku! Shigaraki called, glaring at the intruders. Leave. No. And why should we listen to you? Another hit landed on Izuku's stomach, making him belch noiselessly. He forced his eyes open to see Kurojairi and Shigaraki fighting off the intruders poorly. Kurojairi was detained, seemingly unable to summon his portals, and Shigaraki was smashed over the head with a plank. He teared up, eyes watery as the trio continued to be beat. But we didn't do anything wrong. He tried to stand, but was only sent back to the ground with another blistering hit. Izuku struggled to escape in air, feeling a large bruise form on his stomach from the constant kicking. Only when he noticed blood pooling did his world seem to stop. Shigaraki was on the ground, blood seeping from a reopened wound as he was continuously beat. Suddenly, everything seemed to happen at once. The men that were assaulting them all had their heads cut off in a split second, the removed body parts rolling around with wide eyes and open mouths. Blood splashed against the wooden walls, painting them a sickeningly red. The smell of iron intruded his senses as he was ushered into someone's arms. Who was it? They were whispering calming words to him. Calm down, Izuku-san. It's all right, we're fine now. Tamura is all right. Blinking a few times, the world reformed around him. However, the sight was anything but pleasant. Blood dripped from the ceiling as body parts lay strewn about. Fingers were removed from hands and eyeballs splat across the walls. Izuku turned around and threw up. What happened? Did I do that? Kurogyari gave him comforting pats on his back, eyeing Shigaraki as a man walked into the room and picked the young boy up, setting him on the bed. Izuku coughed, emptying his stomach completely of all of its contents. He turned back around, eyes watery and snot hanging from his nose, to see an unfamiliar man stare at him. A cool and collected voice came from the man. What happened? A tense silence emanated from the room, the only sounds being the blood slowly dripping from the ceiling and the quiet breathing of the occupants inside. Izuku couldn't find his voice, but that didn't really matter. Even if he could talk at the moment, he wouldn't know what to say. He had no idea what had actually happened. Everything just blurred together after he noticed that Tamura wasn't moving. Sensei, Kurogyari spoke first, breaking the thick silence. Welcome back. The man glanced at him, eyes landing on Izuku. Well, Kurogyari, it seems you have quite a bit of explaining to do. The misted man bowed. Of course. Sensei, as Kurogyari called him, held out an arm to Tamura, a green light emitting from his hand. After a few seconds, all of Tamura's wounds were healed, as if nothing had happened. Looking around, he snapped his fingers, the blood mysteriously disappearing as well as the bodies, making Izuku's eyes widen in shock. Kurogyari set him down and followed the man out of the room, the door closing with a quiet click behind them. Izuku wasn't sure what to do, just awkwardly standing there for a few moments. How did he manage to clean everything up so fast? He eyed the room, still unable to believe it had been covered in blood. However, a quick glance at himself told him everything. It wasn't a dream. Did it happen? Those men were killed, and Izuku was sure he had something to do with it. Tears pricked behind his eyes, threatening to spill out. He didn't want to be a murderer. He didn't want to, but he couldn't feel bad for those men. They had hurt his friends. He could consider Tamura and Kurogyari his friends, right? And he just wanted to protect them. A groan brought him from his thoughts, head snapping to look at where Tamura lay. The boy grumbled and slowly sat up, rubbing their head. Izuku smiled, letting out a breath of relief, rushing over to him. He brought the other into a hug, earning a surprised yelp. Izuku, what the dash? I'm so glad, he whispered, cutting Tamura off, choking back a sob. I'm so glad you're okay. Whatever Tamura was going to say died in his throat, looking down at the boy who was hugging him, trembling, as if he almost lost someone important to him. Unable to say anything, he awkwardly pat Izuku's head, making sure he had a finger up so that not all five were touching him. The smaller child let out a breathy laugh, nuzzling against Tamura's chest. After a few minutes, Sensei and Kurogyari returned, causing Izuku to let go. The man walked up to the green-haired child, kneeling down so that they were at eye level. Hello, young man. I understand that you've saved my boy not only once, but twice. And not only him, but Kurogyari as well. Izuku blushed, mouth opening and closing as he tried to come up with something to say. Sensei chuckled, patting the child's head. It's all right, my boy. Thank you. I'm not sure what would have happened if you were there. It's fine, Izuku squeaked out, completely embarrassed by the sound of his own voice. Sensei smiled gently. Your name is Izuku, correct? A nod. I see. Well then, Izuku, I understand that you might have some powerful magic inside of you. His eyes widened. Having strong magic? The man examined him, eyes cool and calm. Young man, how would you like to learn how to use that magic, so that you can protect those important to you? Izuku couldn't believe his ears. Not only was he told he had magic all of a sudden, but he was being offered by a complete stranger to hone those skills. He was sure he'd faint if his mind was in the right place. However, all he could do was gape at the man with owlish eyes, unable to say anything. You don't have to decide right now, but I would appreciate if you at least gave it some thought. He quickly nodded. He didn't want to be rude to someone Kurogyari and Tamura knew. The man chuckled and ruffled his hair, turning his attention to Tamura. Tamura, it seems you've lost your edge over the months. The other clicked his tongue, glaring at the ground. Sorry, Sensei. Seems like I'll have to retrain you. He sighed, getting back up. Izuku, the child flinched, looking up at him. Feel free to come visit us at any time. You are always welcome here. Izuku smiled brightly at him, eyes shining with childish innocence. Really? Thank you, sensei. He raised an eyebrow, causing the child to stumble on his words. I heard Kurogiri-sen call you that, and I just assumed, I'm sorry dash. He raised a hand, silencing the child, amusement flickering in his eyes. It's quite all right. I don't mind. He smiled, letting out a sigh of relief. Izuku, Tamura said, getting the younger's attention. I have a few questions. Okay. He smiled and wobbled to his side, happily answering anything Tamura asked. Sensei watched the interaction between the two with silent interest, backing away to give the two space. Kurogiri came to his side, also watching the two boys. It seems Tamura has developed interest in Midoriya. Kurogiri's words were met with a nod, the man's eyes never leaving the two. You said his surname was Midoriya? Yes. It seems he is the child of Midoriya Inko who fled the village 6 years ago. Interesting. It seems like those rumors were true. If we manage to convince him to our side, he'll become an important asset to our cause. But of course, I'm sure it won't be long. He seems to have taken a liking to us. The sun began to set as Izuku and Tamura chatted, both enjoying the conversation in their own way. Izuku glanced out the window, warm oranges and red dyeing the town in their warm colors. He got up from the foot of the bed, smiling at his new friend. I'd better be going back. He turned to leave, only to be stopped by a gently pull of his shirt. He looked back to see Tamura grabbing at the hem of his shirt, looking to the side in embarrassment as a blush colored his pale face. Tomorrow, he tilted his head, confused, inviting the other to continue. Tamura chewed his bottom lip, continuing, his voice small. You'll come back tomorrow, right? Izuku was silent for a moment before smiling happily, nodding. Of course. Bye, Muriken. He waved and ran out, leaving behind a bewildered Kurogiri and amused sensei. Weeks passed and Izuku made sure to visit Tamura daily, when possible. He'd managed to get to know the other better through their talks and happily told him about his escapades with Katsuki as well as fun stories about his mom, along with Yagi. Tamura listened patiently, only talking when Izuku paused to add in his own opinions. Of course, Tamura wasn't the only one he got to know better. He also got to know more about Kurogiri and Sensei, the latter usually never there, but when he was, Izuku made sure to give him a proper greeting. One day he noticed Kurogiri writing something down, and when he asked, the other's response was, I'm just reinforcing our magical barrier. It seems our last one was too weak, which allowed those men to find us. That day never left Izuku's mind. Despite what he tells himself, he would always have nightmares about it, still seeing those dead eyes in his dreams. It seemed to affect him while awake, as bags began to form under his eyes, which apparently were extremely noticeable, as Tamura finally commented on them as he walked through the door. You look like you haven't slept for months. Izuku gave him a small, tired smile as he sat on the chair next to the bed, Kurogiri having had one brought in so that he wasn't always standing during their visits. I just haven't been able to sleep that well lately. I'm sure it'll pass. The other didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. What do you have for me today? He smiled, eagerly throwing a story out about how he and Katsuki were chased by forest fairies when they stumbled upon their home. Tamura listened quietly, only adding something when necessary. The two continued their talk, unaware that Sensei stood outside the door, listening, a plan being concocted in his head. The day passed as usual, and Izuku left when the sun began to set, promising Tamura that he'd come back tomorrow. Izuku smiled to himself, excited for what stories he could tell his friend the next day, completely unaware that he was being followed. As he jogged through the forest, a burning smell wafted to his nose, causing him to stop. Confused, he looked around. What was burning? He didn't stop for long, as he suddenly remembered his mother, who was home alone. His feet set off, legs pumping as adrenaline flowed through his veins. As he entered view of his house, he tripped over a loose root, causing him to stumble and fall, leaves and grass entering his open mouth. He coughed, spitting, and looked back up, eyes wide. Fire. His home was on fire. A movement caught his attention, and he looked over, seeing a shadow hurry off. The townspeople. They must have found his home. How? Then, it suddenly dawned on him. It's my fault. It's because I left to visit the town, despite Mom's warnings. He pushed himself up, rushing to the burning building, panting. Mom, are you there? When he didn't get an answer, he began to panic and ran to the door. Kicking it open, he ran inside, looking around, sweat dripping from his chin. His eyes landed on his mother's form, laying on the ground, a thin trickle of blood coming from her forehead. Izuku's breath caught in his throat as he rushed over to her, falling to his knees and began shaking her. Wake up. We have to get out. He coughed, smoke entering his lungs, burning his throat. The ceiling began to fall apart, a plank of wood slamming down near Izuku's feet. He didn't notice, still desperately trying to wake his unconscious mother. Mom, please. Wake up. He coughed more, his vision beginning to blur. He faded in and out of consciousness, his mind fogging up as he tried to keep his eyes open. However, he soon fell victim to his tiredness, slumping down as he slowly faded into darkness, the house crumbling around him. Izuku awoke to a throbbing pain in his head as he was being shook. Blinking his eyes open, his vision blurred, barely able to recognize his mother's relieved face. Oh, Izuku, my baby. I'm so glad you're okay. She whimpered, hugging him tightly, tears running down her face. He groaned, mind still groggy, blinking, trying to refocus his eyes. Once he was able to see somewhat clearly, he was able to make out his surroundings. Surprisingly, the house was still standing, though there was a somewhat large hole in the ceiling, allowing the rain that was pouring down into the building. The smell of wet, burnt wood invaded his nose, making his face scrunch up. Inko picked him up, carrying him to her room, setting him on her bed. Go to bed, sweetie. I'm sure you're tired. I'll be right here with you. She gently brushed hair from his face, giving him a watery smile. Izuku nodded wordlessly, his throat still stinging from the smoke. However, he didn't sleep. He closed his eyes, listening to his mother's soft sobs as she apologized to him for reasons he knew weren't her fault. After around an hour, he opened his eyes and got out of bed, walking to the window. Does the world want cruelty? Izuku said to himself quietly, listening to the soft breaths of his mother after she had finally cried herself to sleep. He glared out the window of his broken home to the pitch-black sky, rain coming down in steady streams, eyes cold and dead. If it's cruelty they want, then cruelty they will get. Katsuki never needed friends. Even when he was abandoned as a baby and adopted by the local fire dragon, Ignis, he never saw the need for friends as he grew. He was fine with just Ignis, who he considered his father, despite being a completely different species. The large dragon found him crying near a riverbank, wrapped tightly in a small blanket. Unable to bear seeing such a small child crying and all on their own, the beast gently picked him up with his jaws, carrying the crying child to his nest in a cave at the bottom of a mountain. The dragon named him Katsuki, telling him when he was older that the reason he named him that was because it gave off the feeling of power and dignity. Katsuki was proud to have his name. Ignis taught Katsuki to read and write, having a surprisingly large understanding of the human language, as well as teaching him to hunt after the child continuously nagged him to do so. On Katsuki's first hunt, a few days after he had turned 4, he rushed out of the cave eagerly, having an amused Ignis slowly trail behind. They'd spent the first half of the day going over the basics, such as being stealthy and how to properly make and use makeshift weapons. How Ignis knew how to make a crude, homemade dagger was beyond Katsuki, he learned fast to not question. It's not like he ever got a solid answer anyway. The dragon glanced up at the sky, noting how the sun glared just overhead, and grumbled, "It is time for lunch. You can go on ahead." Katsuki said, frowning as the rock he was sharpening wasn't quite to his liking just yet. "I'll stay out here a bit longer. Just call when it's ready." A low rumble left the beast, turning and walking away. The blonde child continued with his sharpening, slowly becoming satisfied as his constant working was paying off. A few minutes passed and a sound made Katsuki perk up. He was aware that there was a village nearby outside of the forest, but he was never truly interested. From how Ignis described it, it just seemed too loud and annoying. Humans seemed like too much trouble, and he never wanted to encounter one, despite being on himself. He stopped clanking his rock against the other rock he was sharpening it with and blew off the small, chipped-off particles. The sound rustled again, but it seemed to be a bit further off. He huffed. Well, whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be coming for me. He decided to ignore it, choosing to continue working on his dagger. It wasn't quite a dagger just yet, but like he said, it was a work in progress, even if it was just a rock at the moment. Around 15 minutes pass. Yes, Katsuki was aware how time worked, courtesy of Ignis, before Katsuki heard a scream. He jumped, both rocks falling from his hands, as he spun around in shock. He wasn't able to recognize the scream, as it didn't sound like any animal he's ever heard before, but that didn't stop him from rushing to where the sound came from. A growl escaped his throat as leaves and branches whipped at his face as he ran, another scream erupting, the sound much closer than before. His feet stopped near the front of his home, a small human child on the ground, quivering and whimpering, wide eyes wet as they stared at what was inside. Ignis took a step out, head slowly following, a small amount of fire escaping the creature's mouth as he glared at the human before him. Katsuki wasn't exactly sure what made him do it, as he'd never met any human before and was perfectly content with just leaving things as is. However, when wide green eyes glanced over at him, a silent plea for help, his feet immediately began to move forward, stepping between Ignis and the stranger. Ignis closed his mouth, smoke exhaling from his nostrils. Katsuki, what are you doing? I am sure that you are aware that my presence must not be made public. This child here might tell the villagers of my existence. Before he could even process what he'd actually just done, the child spoke up, surprising them both. I won't tell anyone. Said that I wasn't allowed to go to the V village. And why is that? The beast asked, choosing to sit down as he listened to the small human. They shook their head. I don't know. Never told me B, but I swear I'm telling the truth. Their eyes shone with determination, staring directly into Ignis' eyes. Golden eyes stared into forest green ones, and after a few tense moments, the dragon sighed quietly. All right, I believe you. Your eyes tell no lies. The child smiled brightly. Thank you. Katsuki turned to the other, glaring down at them. Who are you anyway? They quickly got up, dusted themselves off, and smiled shyly. And Midoriya is in me and my mom live here in the forest as well. When the blonde-haired child raised an eyebrow, the other quickly clarified. I'm assuming why you live in the forest as well. Why you live with a Mr. Dragon, alright? He huffed, crossing his arms. Of course I do, dimwit. And his name's Ignis. I'm Katsuki. He gave the child a smug smile, to which Izuku returned with a shy smile of their own. By the way, are you a boy or a girl? I am a boy. The two became quick friends, much to Katsuki and Ignis' surprise. Katsuki never expected to find himself to become fond of anyone else, no matter what, as, while his exterior showed him to be proud and confident, he was insecure on the inside, afraid to be left behind again. He heard that he was abandoned from Ignis, and vowed to never trust humans. However, Izuku managed to break down his walls easily, his shy and nervous smile warm and welcoming. Ignis was happy that his child managed to make a friend of his age and species. He watched happily as months passed, and the two children hanging out more and more. Izuku would come over daily, listening eagerly to Ignis' stories of the outside world and going on small adventures with Katsuki. The two also met the small boy's mom, who he had brought over one day after he told her he made a new friend. Of course she was surprised to see a living dragon, but she soon became fond of them, even treating Katsuki like a second son. After around 2 months of them hanging out, the blonde child demanded to see Izuku's home, to which the other complied, albeit a bit confused. Upon seeing the smaller boy's house, Katsuki was confused as to why it was quite a bit smaller than the ones in the village, to which he'd been to once, so that he could hold it over the other's head. Izuku didn't really have an explanation, and Auntie, which Katsuki called the other boy's mother, never really said anything about it either, seeming to be uncomfortable with the subject, so he just let it be. Though the blonde did become a bit concerned when he entered, seeing that they didn't have a proper kitchen and hardly any furniture. He found that they only had 2 plates and a makeshift knife Auntie managed to make, telling them that they hadn't eaten meat since coming into the forest. It didn't seem to bother them, though being told by the green-haired child that he'd actually never eaten meat nearly made Katsuki's eyes pop out of their sockets. "It's just a leisurely that we can't afford," Auntie told him, a small, sad smile gracing her lips. The 2 children grew up together, Katsuki actually becoming slightly protective of Izuku over the years. The useless fucker couldn't protect himself properly, earning him the nickname Deku. Izuku, of course, retaliated by calling him Kakin. He'd never admit it made him blush out of embarrassment. Of course, after their first year together, Katsuki had actually manifested magic, able to create explosions from the sweat of his hands. Izuku gushed over him constantly, eyes wide with awe whenever he would use it. He would never admit it made his chest puff out slightly in pride. Katsuki made his way home after a long day's hunt, having yet to see Izuku at all that day. He huffed, slightly annoyed. How dare that useless Deku ignore him for a whole day? He stormed to his home, however a waft of smoke stopped him in his tracks. Raising an eyebrow, he looked around. Was something on fire? After a minute of looking, he shrugged, assuming it was nothing too terribly important. He made his way back to the cave, throwing the hog he'd caught to the side for dinner. He frowned, remembering when he'd offered meat to Auntie. "Oh no, I couldn't take that," she said, a bit panicked. "Don't worry about us, Katsuki. Ignis-san and you need meat more than us, correct?" A growl came from his throat, unhappy that he couldn't help them out more. He threw himself on his makeshift bed of leaves and slowly fell asleep, ignoring Ignis chastising him for taking a nap before nightfall. A low grumble awoke him, making him grumble himself as he sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked around to see Ignis asleep nearby. His eyes made it to the cave's entrance to see that it was raining quite heavily. Katsuki sighed, about to go back to sleep, when he noticed something from the corner of his eye. Looking back outside, his eyes widened when he noticed a thick cloud of smoke floating up to the sky. Smoke? Then, it suddenly hit him. The fire. A light panic began to spark through his skin. "Deku!" Bolting out, he made a beeline to Izuku's house, hoping that the fire hadn't gotten to him. "If you die, I'll kill you myself." "Deku!" Izuku woke with a start, blinking sleep from his eyes, still groggy. He looked around, finding that he'd fallen asleep at the window, a thin blanket draped over his shoulders. His mother was nowhere to be seen. Narrowing his eyes, the boy took a look outside. The sun was just barely rising, its warm colors coloring the light sheet of rain still coming down. A small sigh escaped his lips as he rose, bones creaking in protest from his awkward sleeping position. He massaged his shoulders, yawning quietly, letting the blanket fall as he made his way to the kitchen where he assumed his mom would be. He was right, Inko was talking to an irritated Katsuki, who he assumed just let himself in, seeing as how they were now missing their front door. Both turned to look at him, his mother smiling warmly at him while the blonde scowled, stomping over to him. "Deku, what the hell happened?" he demanded, rage flickering in his red iris. "How in the ever-loving F did your house catch on fire?" The green-haired child blinked slowly, still trying to wake up his mind. Don't just, me." Katsuki spat, throwing his hands on his hips. "Well, are you alright? You aren't hurt, are ya? I killed you if you died." "You can't kill someone who's already dead," Izuku mumbled, yawning again. He was too tired to do anything today. "Do you think I care? Answer my question, fuck munch." Now, Inko interrupted, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm glad you're worried about us, Katsuki, but we're both fine. Just a bit tired is all." Katsuki didn't seem all that satisfied with that, but didn't argue further. He sighed loudly. "Fine, whatever. You can come live with Ignis and I dash." "Mom." Izuku interrupted, earning a glare from his friend. The woman turned to him, tilting her head. You know as well as I do that what happened wasn't an accident. Her smile slowly faded. Oh, how she wished her son wasn't so vigilant. Despite his young age, he was very observant. Of course he'd be suspicious of a fire starting out of nowhere. She looked into his eyes, flinching slightly at how cold they were. Was her son even capable of having such a lifeless expression? Mom, please. Her child began to beg, taking a step forward. Please tell us. He gestured to Katsuki. Why were we kicked out of the village? Inko glanced down, hyper-aware of the children's gazes on her. She knew that one day she couldn't keep everything a secret. She just had hoped it wasn't so soon. She sighed quietly, nodding reluctantly. All right, let's go. To my room. She led them to the only room that was minimally affected by the fire. After sitting them down on the bed, she returned her gaze to theirs, forcing herself to not look away. It's a long story. A story that began when I met your father. It was a warm spring afternoon. People walked through the weathered streets, laughter and words mingling together. Inko worked at a small-time bakery, smiling as sweat trickled down her face from the ovens behind her. It was a fairly busy day, people coming and going for short lunch snacks either coming from or to work. She bowed politely as a couple left, swallowing down an envious sigh. How she wished for love herself. She shook her head. She was on the job. The door opened, making her turn, a customer's smile on her lips, ready to serve them. Welcome, how may I help? Her voice died on her tongue, the sight before her unable to process in her mind. A handsome gentleman walked in, dark hair married with dark eyes. The two caught each other's eyes, a light blush gracing each other's cheeks as they looked away quickly. Clearing her throat, she continued from where she left off. Welcome, how may I help you? She flashed him a shy smile, earning a beautiful smile in return. Yes, I would like a sweet roll. The man bowed his head, seemingly slightly embarrassed. She chuckled. Of course, coming right up. Inko turned, looking for what the man asked. She found it, gently placing it on a napkin to keep from burning anyone's hands with chopsticks. Giving it to him, he thanked her and paid up front. Thanks. I might come again. He winked and chuckled, walking away, leaving behind a flustered Inko. 2 years passed, with the man visiting Inko at least once a week, the two growing very close. During his visits, the green-haired woman learned his name was Midoriya Hisashi and that he came from quite a large family. He spoke highly of his sisters, one younger and one older, and recalled fond memories of his brother, whom was older and very motherly. The way he talked about his father was quite fond as well, but never brought up word about his mother. Inko never said anything about that, however. She didn't want to push at something that might be painful for him. Of course, Inko gave information about herself, telling him her age, which was 18 when they first met, and that she was a single child with loving parents. At the mention of that, Hisashi's expression soured a bit but was quickly removed before she could really tell. As days passed and as the two got closer, Inko found that she was quite the talk around her town. Not when she was around or within earshot, of course. However, some people weren't as good at whispering as they thought they were. She managed to get snippets of conversations from people who were not so subtly whispering. Did you hear? That girl who works at the bakery is seeing Hisashi. Do you mean the Hisashi? Midoriya Hisashi? Yeah, him. Oh, poor girl. Doesn't know what she's getting herself into? But what's wrong? Isn't the Midoriya clan known for having some of their family mysteriously disappear? Yeah. They've been around for so long, too. I hear they even have history books dedicated to them. Oh no. Well, we can't stop her. Just pray she knows what she's getting into. What they said disturbed her. Missing family members? Midoriya clan? She was deadly curious, but she couldn't just ask Hisashi. He'd most likely just brush it off. Her thoughts were interrupted as bile rose to her throat, making her run to her bathroom, releasing it in the sink. She coughed roughly, gingerly wiping the remains from her lips. Worried she'd gotten sick without knowing it, she hurried to the doctor, making sure to tell her boss and Hisashi, whom she'd planned on meeting later that day, that she was going to the hospital. After a few hours and many tests later, Inko shifted slightly in her seat as her doctor stood before her, Hisashi by her side. He had come just a few minutes after her, worried about her. "Well?" The man in the white cloak in front of her began, looking at his clipboard with blank face. "Congratulations, young lady. You're PR'd in NT." Silence. She was what now? Hisashi beside her began to tremble, making her glance over at him in worry. However, relief washed over her when she saw his face. Tears pooled at the ends of his eyes and he was smiling from ear to ear. After learning of the news, Hisashi finally proposed to her a few days later, admitting he didn't know how to until then. Months passed in a blur, Inko and Hisashi working hard to plan their wedding, her soon-to-be husband's family even coming down to help. During all of the chaos, the whispers and rumors spreading around town were completely forgotten. All that mattered was the wedding and their happiness. A week before the wedding was when Inko's parents came, too busy to come before then. She happily welcomed them, introducing them to Hisashi. After learning his last name, the couple became wary. They even gave Inko cryptic warnings. "Inko!" Her mother called, the green-haired woman turning to face her, eyebrow raised in question. "Are you sure this is the man you want to spend the rest of your life with?" She furrowed her brows. "Of course. I love him and he loves me." Her father stepped next to her mother, resting a hand on her shoulder. "We just want you to be safe and happy." Inko frowned at the word, safe. What were they trying to pull? "As long as you believe this will work out, so will we." They didn't say anything else about the issue after that, but still kept a keen eye on Hisashi. Inko decided to ignore it. She was getting married after all. The week passed and the wedding went through smoothly. They moved into Hisashi's house, which was surprisingly big. Were the Midoriyas a rich family? And Inko smiled. She couldn't be happier. Once Izuku was born, Inko saw a shift in Hisashi. It started off as a happy one at first. He'd care for the child with great caution and love, happily spouting baby noises and nonsense to their son. Inko couldn't count how many times she'd caught him gushing over their newborn when she came home from work. She smiled and giggled when he'd look up at her, face flushed with embarrassment. Of course their marriage didn't stop the whispers in town. No, in fact, they got much worse. Day after day Inko would walk past someone talking about her, always saying one thing or another about the Midoriya family. After a year and a half, she'd finally gotten tired of not knowing anything. One day after work she stopped by the library, renting out all books that pertained to the Midoriyas. She made her way home and hurried to her room, giving a passing greeting to her husband and child, who both seemed occupied with each other at the moment. Sitting down at her desk, she tossed the books down, quickly getting to work. Flipping through page after page quickly got tiring, nothing of notice popping out at her. That was until one of the books mentioned a curse. Her eyes scanned the words a second time before continuing. The Midoriya clan has been around for centuries. They are a well-known and powerful family with many influences. However, early in their reign, a jealous witch placed a curse upon them. The curse would give every other child born into the family a sort of black magic. While the curse may not sound threatening, it was. Black magic was frowned upon, and anyone with it was immediately outed as an outcast. If this secret got out, the Midoriya clan would perish and be hunted, for black magic users were thought of as the devil's spawn and killed on sight. Years of this curse affected them greatly, but they soon found a solution. On the second year since the child's birth, they are likely to show whether or not they have the cursed magic or not. It was usually prompted when the child or someone they loved was in danger, so they would devise a plan to have either the child or someone close to them hurt or in trouble. After this, if the child shows no signs of magic, such as the ability to conjure dark entities or use any sort of destruction spells, they are quickly rescued and are treated normally. However, if the child does prove to have such dark magic, they are either left to be killed by whatever they decided to use for the test or by a member of the family. The latter was usually the one used, as it was a definite and there would be no worries about having any evidence left behind. While able to keep their reputation intact, they are still feared throughout the land as many worry about their missing family members who are never mentioned by anyone in the clan afterward, as if they never existed in the first place. Inko dropped the book, trembling in surprised shock as she brought her shaking hands to her mouth. eyes beginning to water. How could they do this? Even if a child was born with black magic, it wasn't their fault. They shouldn't be outed and killed for something they had no control over. Her eyes moved to the window, watching the sun dip beneath the horizon. Half a year. That's how long they had until Izuku either proved them right or showed them they were wrong. She bowed her head, shoulders shaking. Please, she begged to the lords above. Please allow Izuku to live a normal life. It seems that the gods above just wanted Inko to suffer. 6 months after her discovery and heightened wariness of her husband was when Inko's life shattered. Hisashi came home early that day, Inko having taken the day off in order to do her best to protect her precious son. However, Hisashi ripped their child from her arms without warning and dragged him outside despite Inko's pleas. He dragged their tired and confused son to a dark alley, calling out to someone in the emptiness. A few heartbeats passed before a group of armed men walked out from the shadows, menacing grins plastered across their faces. Izuku was thrown in front of them, landing on his side on the ground, grunting in pain and shock. Inko began to ran forward to protect her baby from harm but was dragged back by Hisashi. What do you think you're doing? She spat in anger, looking from Hisashi to Izuku, struggling against his arms. He's just a child. This is for our safety. He whispered in her ear, eyes never leaving the boy. Don't worry, if he turns out to be good I'll make sure to make up for everything. Mom. Izuku whimpered, sitting up, eyes tearing up. Mom, what's going on? She opened her mouth to answer, to tell him everything will be okay, but she was quickly quieted by Hisashi as he placed a hand over her mouth. Izuku, son, he began, glancing at his wife in his arms. You love your mother dearly, don't you? The boy frowned, nodding vigorously. Oh, of course. Then, he breathed out, pushing her to the armed men. You'll protect her, right? His eyes widened as he saw his mother slam into one of the men, who happily grabbed her wrist and pulled her arm up. Let me go. She hissed, tugging at her arm. Now, lady, we're just doing what we've been paid to do. The one holding her said, nodding to another in the group who held up a large stick-like weapon. Don't worry, we were ordered to not kill you. Just really bad. A loud slap echoed throughout the alley as well as a sudden scream in pain. Izuku began to cry, unable to comprehend what was going on. He quickly got up, running to his mother, trying to remove her from the assailant's grasp. Let go of her. He pleaded. Let go of mommy. The man threw him to the side, grunting in annoyance. Shut up, kid. Just hurry up and do whatever you're supposed to do so we can get paid. Another smack and another bone-chilling scream. Inko gripped her leg with her free arm, tears spilling from her eyes. 2 pairs of wet green eyes met, and something in Izuku snapped as he noticed a trail of blood going down her leg. In the blink of an eye the men imploded, intestines and other bodily organs flying everywhere. Inko fell to her knees, eyes wide in horror. She slowly turned her head to her child, who looked just as scared and terrified as she did. Her mouth shut closed, he was just a child. He had no idea what was going on. However, that didn't stop her husband from walking behind the child and slamming a hammer over his head, knocking the boy out. She cried out, rushing to her son and scooping him up in her arms. Hisashi, what on earth do you think you're doing? Her voice died on her tongue as she saw the crazed face on her past lover's face. He held up the hammer shakily, a creepy smile spread across his face. I'm just protecting us, Inko. You read up on our family's history, right? I'm just making sure we're safe. Why? She began to back away, hugging Izuku closer to her chest. You're crazy. Don't worry, he said, taking a step closer. After this, we'll be safe. It only affects every other family. We just happen to get a bit unlucky is all. After this demon child's gone, we can have a new, proper one. She shook her head. Don't worry, my love. I'll protect us. You know that my mother's gone, right? Well, she happened to be a demon spawn as well. How she managed to trick us for so long we'll never know. But we got rid of her. And look how happy we are now. Just think, no devil child to hold us back and make us fear for our very lives. Shaking her head, she turned and ran, wanting to get away from this crazed man. "Inko, where are you going?" he called out. "If you leave with that thing, I'll make the whole town come after you. You'll have nowhere to go." Inko ignored him. She knew he wasn't lying, there was no reason to at this point. However, she couldn't just let her child die. She wouldn't. "Help! Someone help! A demon child is in our village," Hisashi called out, gathering the attention of everyone in the surrounding area. Cursing under her breath, Inko ran faster. She had to get somewhere safe. After hearing Hisashi's call, the townspeople began to chase after her, yelling and screaming. Rocks hit her arms and legs, causing her to stumble a few times. But she kept on running. Safe, 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 safe. She had to make sure her son was safe. She approached the forest entrance, the angry mob of people still on her tail. She glanced back, catching Hisashi's evil grin, before looking forward again. During her childhood, she had been warned to stay away from the forest. It was not safe there. However, she had a feeling it was the safest place she could ask for at the moment. So she ran into the dark, leafy entrance, hoping to whatever was out there that they would end up safe and sound. Izuku held his breath as his mother told her story, his face twisted in utter disgust and despair. He glanced to his side, seeing that Katsuki looked just as disturbed. Inko hung her head, unable to look at the boys in the eyes. After a few moments, he got up and walked over to her, embracing her in a soft hug. Her eyes widened slightly before tearing up, hugging him back. The blonde looked on awkwardly, not sure on what to do. Izuku didn't want to let his mother go. She'd gone through so much, and yet got nothing in return. He tightened his grip slightly, lips trembling. Their bonding moment was short-lived as a horde of footsteps rumbled to their doorstep. "Here they are!" A voice cried out, making the trio snap their heads to the sound. "The witch and devil's spawn are here. Still alive even after all these years." Katsuki growled, ready to go out and beat them senseless, but Izuku held him back. The others sent him a questioning, yet angry look. He just shook his head, the message clear. No matter how powerful he may be, he couldn't fight all of them off. Not only that, he was just a child. Katsuki growled, clearly annoyed and irritated, but backed off. He knew this wasn't a fight he could win, but he'd be dead if he didn't at least try. People stormed inside, battle cries echoing throughout as they lit the already burnt building once again. The broken house rumbled, Inko hugging both boys closely in an attempt at comfort. Before anyone could make their way inside the room they were in, a loud growl halted everyone in their tracks. "A dragon!" Someone yelped. The blonde child smirked happy. "Ignis! Not only does this witch have a demon child, but she is also familiar with a dragon. Take it down. Nothing makes it out of here alive." The trio glanced out the window to see Ignis growling at the townspeople, fire pooling out from his mouth. Inko quickly opened the window, ushering the children out. The two quickly climbed out, helping her out in return. Someone caught sight of them, calling out to the others. Izuku clicked his tongue, glancing around, trying to come up with a plan. As others turned and noticed them, something clicked. He grabbed the others' arms, dragging them over to Ignis, earning a surprised yelp from both. "Ignis-san." The dragon turned to look at him, nostrils flaring. "Please, take Mom and Kaken with you to somewhere safe." "What?" Katsuki managed after a few seconds of shock. "Like hell, we're just going to leave you behind dash. Please," he said, ignoring his friend's words. Golden eyes observed him for a moment. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Positive." Ignis flared out a wing, sending the townspeople back with a strong gust of wind. He picked the two protesting humans up, placing them on his back. "What are you doing?" Inko yelled, desperately trying to find a way down. "Don't leave my baby down there." "Deku, you little sheet." Katsuki spat, and despite his angered glare, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. "The F? Do you think you're doing?" He simply smiled up at them. "Ignis-san, please keep them safe." The dragon simply huffed. "Of course I will. I expect you to come see them after you're done here." Izuku said nothing, just watching as the large beast slowly lifted into the air before taking off, the screams of his mother and friend fading into the distance. He glanced around, noting that most of the people were still recovering from the sudden gust of wind. Taking advantage of this, Izuku ran off. He knew where he was going. It was the only place he could go. Entering the town, he ran to the house he was familiar with. Slamming the door open, he was met with a surprised Kurogyari and emotionless sensei. He panted, looking up at the two. "Please, train me on how to properly use my magic." A wisp of hot air bundles in front of red lips as a breath is exhaled, mittened hands rubbing together in an attempt for warmth. Flakes of snow floated down gracefully to the blanketed ground of white as boots crunched down on the pure surface. Green eyes examined the surroundings, taking in everything they could, despite having seen them many times before. The boy shivered slightly, quickening his pace. He hurried inside the large cabin hidden behind a large cliff, a brush of cold air flowing against the exposed skin. Opening the door, the boy quickly stepped inside and closed the door, wincing once he noticed that he brought in a bit of snow. Kurogyari was not going to like that. He brushed off the white substance he'd gathered from his clothes and hair, grimacing as the snow wet his mittens. The boy gave himself a look over before shrugging off his coat, placing it on the coat rack. A large fire crackled in the fireplace at the end of the room, warming his frozen skin as he sighed in relief. "Izuku!" A voice called out to him, making him turn, raising an eyebrow in question. Tamura walked out, bundled up in a thick coat, thicker than Izuku's, and long pants, the ends clipping over his roughened boots. White hair poked out from behind a fluffy woolen hat, tired red eyes looking down at the mess below the other boy's feet. "Seems like you brought back enough to make a small snowman." Izuku frowned, pursing a lip. "I didn't mean to. Kurogyari's not gonna be happy about this. You could try to kick it back outside. That'd just bring in more. Have you seen how much snow is out there?" "I believe that was the point." "I hate you." "No, you don't." The older smirked, earning an eye roll and small push from the younger. They both knew it was true, but Izuku wasn't going to play into his ego like that. He simply brushed past the other and sat on the cushioned couch in front of the blazing fire. Tamura followed, his smirk not gone, but instead wider as he plopped down next to the smaller child. The two sat in comfortable silence until they heard footsteps come from the back hallway. Izuku winced and shrunk into himself, knowing full well whom those footsteps belonged to and not fully prepared for what that meant. The steps stopped, and so did the boy's breathing. After a few tense moments, in which Izuku could swear Tamura was trying his hardest not to laugh, the newcomer finally spoke. "So, Izuku-san." A flinch. "It seems you've dragged in quite the mess." Green eyes stared at the wooden floor, finding it suddenly more interesting. "Do you remember what I told you last time you did this?" Izuku let out a quiet whine, nodding. "Then, might I ask why you thought it'd be a good idea to do so once again?" He finally looked up, flinching slightly as his eyes met golden yellow ones, narrowed, unamused. I didn't mean to. Besides, I found something that you might like." The other hummed, prompting him to continue, showing slight interest in the statement. He smiled, stuffing his hand in his pocket, rummaging around. After a second he pulled out a beaten and worn scroll, a bit crumpled and slight tears at the edges. He got up and walked over to the man, handing his finding over. The other gingerly took it, examining it under critical eyes. "Where did you find this?" Izuku smiled. "It was hidden in the cave at the other end of the cliff." "What in the world were you doing all the way over there?" Kurogyari fret, checking him over for anything out of place. "Are you all right? Were you hurt?" The boy laughed. "I'm fine, Mom." It was an inside joke between the group. Kurogyari acted much like a mom for them, always worrying over them and making sure they stay in line. It was a nice feeling, especially ever since he left his actual mother 8 years ago. That seemed like such a long time ago. Once he'd asked Sensei to help train him to use his magic, the man agreed quite chipperly, but had just one condition. "You'll have to come with us." He told the child before him, eyeing him carefully. "We can no longer stay in this place, it's not safe. In order for us to teach you properly, you'll need to be with us at all times." "I'll go." Izuku replied immediately, no hesitation in his decision. Sensei smiled, a flicker of amusement flashing in his dark eyes. Good. Welcome home, then, Midoriya Izuku. A bright smile answered those words, the child's eyes watering, nodding. I'm home. After that, the group had been teleported to an isolate place Sensei had found when he was out during his trips. I guess that explains why he was hardly ever around when I visited, Izuku thought passingly, though he wasn't too sure how the man managed to go so far on his own. That question was answered once he found out that Sensei had quite the array of powers, which wasn't that much of a surprise. He gave off a powerful aura and seemed very wise and knowledgeable. Which also explained why the man offered to train Izuku. It'd be hard to do so without much knowledge of magic. When the Fursum had arrived at the place Sensei found, Izuku was elated to see snow. When he lived in the forest, snow was just something he read in books. It was too warm there for snow to properly form. He'd gone around cheerfully, playing around in the snow, an amused Kurogyari and Sensei watching from afar, Tamura looking a bit confused. Apparently the older teen had traveled around with Kurogyari and Sensei a bit too, the elder retelling a few of the places he'd been to an excitable Izuku. While the two chatted away, Sensei had created a cabin for the group to live in, just at the end of the bottom of a large cliff. The surrounding area had quite a lot of trees and was deemed perfect for not only Izuku's training, but for hiding, as the terrain leading to it was too harsh for anyone to properly go through. Near the middle of the bottom of the cliff was a large cavern, dark and foreboding. Both children were forbidden from exploring it, despite Izuku's protests. Tamura didn't seem to care that much. He was cold and hurried inside, grumbling about how he'd catch his death if he stayed outside any longer. Izuku opted to stay outside, eager to spend more time in the winter wonderland. He caught a cold due to that, but he swore it was worth it. Of course, not everything the past 8 years had been fun and games. Izuku had trained hard to hone his skills, being taught close combat and how to use knives alongside his powers. The first time he used his power consciously, he'd managed to cut down the whole forest in front of their house. He turned to a gawking Kurogyari and impressed Sensei. While it was nice to be so powerful, Izuku didn't find it at all satisfying. Sure, it'd be easy to just go around showing that he was powerful and make people bow to him that way, but that was too easy. Also, it was more likely for people to revolt. While he was sure he could handle anything anyone threw at him, it would get tiresome after a while. He wanted those he came across to suffer. To cry in agony and pain even death couldn't get rid of. It's what they deserve, after all. After all the hell they put his mother through, there was no punishment grave enough for what the pitiful existence of humanity has done. And it wasn't just to him and Inko. No, that isn't enough for the demons wearing human skin. It happened to Tamura, Kurogyari, even Sensei. They would pay. So, he had Sensei teach him how to rein it in. How? Make it able to target a single object and mess with it how he pleases. He smiled, bringing himself back to the present. He saw Kurogyari chastise Tamura for something, the white-haired teen waving his hand dismissively, but quiet fondness shone in his tired eyes. Izuku smiled wider. He'd protect them, the people he considered family. The ones who've loved and cared for him, even when no one else would. All for one had a plan. Like his nickname stated, he was considered quite the selfish person. Once he had heard the young child who had saved Tamura's name, he knew that the child would become a great asset to his plans. He just had to give the child a little push. Once the child left one day after his daily meeting with Tamura, Sensei smirked to himself. He had prepared the day before a small scheme to help push the boy to his side. Yesterday, he had gone out, changing his appearance to match a typical townsperson, and wandered around for a bit. While out, he noticed a guy eyeing the forest with suspicious eyes. He asked him about it. "I thought I saw a kid run in there." The other replied simply, "Eyes never leaving the Green Haven. But I'm not too sure. I mean, no one is stupid enough to go in there, you'd end up dead at best." Sensei smiled slightly. Seems like he found the perfect guinea pig. "Oh, is that so? I've seen a child go to and from there as well. I believe they had green hair and eyes. And I believe I saw them hanging around those hooligan outcasts." The man propped an eyebrow up, finally sparing him a glance. "Oh." He turned his gaze back to the forest entrance, expression hardening. Guess I'll take a look next time? He had to hold back a smirk. Humans were so easy to manipulate. Instead, he nodded. Try following them tomorrow. Maybe you'll find out something interesting. What do you dash? The man turned to him, but no one was there. He looked around, confused. Wasn't someone just beside him? He shrugged, looking back at the forest. Whatever. He had bigger things to deal with. So, Sensei watched Izuku leave, a smile never leaving his lips. The beginning of his plan was in action. It took only a day for the young boy to come running to them. All for one was pleasantly surprised, while his assistant, Kurojairi, stared at the child in bemusement. Of course he didn't let it show on his face, no. He needed to make sure everything went accordingly. So, he accepted, but had one simple condition. Izuku had to travel with them. He couldn't leave them. He made the excuse that it was for training his magic, but Sensei held back the true reason. They needed this child. With him, the whole world would easily fall into their hands. It did slightly surprise him when the child accepted immediately, no hesitation whatsoever. That only served to make Sensei smirk. This child was ready to be molded into the perfect weapon. He took them to a remote area where the climate was always cold, snow constantly falling down. The path to them was filled with jagged mountains and frequent avalanches. No one would be getting to them anytime soon. His plan then set into action. He began to teach Izuku how to use his power properly, while watching as the child slowly grew attached to them. Everything was going according to plan. Then it happened. A little over a year since their departure from the village, Sensei noticed a change in Izuku. The child grew finicky, a bit more jittery than he usually was. Of course he knew why. The child was worried about his mother and friend. He'd left without warning, without a proper goodbye. Any child would worry what their loved ones would think if they hadn't heard from them in so long. Sensei couldn't have that. But he couldn't just let the child go see them, no. That might ruin his plan, and he wasn't going to test it. So, at night, once the boy had fallen asleep, he approached him. Placing a hand over the child's forehead, he let him magic do its work. He didn't give the child false memories, as if they were to ever run into the two that would just put doubt in the boy's mind. Instead, he had the child's mind calm down, making it accept the fact they left without word. He made it so Izuku didn't question why they left without a proper goodbye, making the child calm and trusting to Sensei's word. Sensei was never wrong. There was no problem with him leaving his mother and friend like he did. They would understand. Sensei knew what he was doing. All for one smiled to himself as he finished. This child was his, and he was going to mold him into the perfect being crafted by his own will. There was no way he was going to let this boy go so easily. Pained, short breaths SED through closed teeth. Blood trailed after a limping, broken leg, a hand on the thigh to try to keep it as steady as possible. Painful-looking stitches covered the bottom half of the bloodied face, chest, and arms. Pitch black hair blended into the darkness of the cool cave, the other hand dragging blood along the ragged walls. A noise of pain left their throat, blue eyes a sort of glowing luminescent, cutting through the darkness. Blurred vision could barely make out an exit a bit away, white fighting against the black around it. A grunt as the footing slipped slightly, stumbling forward, grabbing onto the wall for support. Just a bit more, and freedom would be greeted. Only a bit longer. However, hooded eyes slowly closed as consciousness faded from the mind. Falling against the wall and to the floor, the whole world went black. Izuku wandered around the endless plain of white, forest green eyes, taking in the endless wonder. While the magic of seeing snow for the first time has faded, it never ceased to calm him. In all honesty, he preferred the cold to the heat. Summer happened to be his least favorite season. Not that it mattered here. The only thing this place knew was snow. He hovered near the cliff's wall, humming to a tune in his head. Today was a rare day off for him, and he planned to enjoy it to the fullest. His first order of business, exploring the cave further. Despite Kurojairi and Sensei's warnings, he just couldn't fight off the itch of curiosity about the dark abyss. There was just something about it that drew him in. As he neared, the harsh scent of iron crammed his nose, making his scrunch up his face. He'd only smelt it this strongly once before, and that was when he killed the men that attacked him, Tamura, and Kurojiri back in the village. The smell just reminded him of how unpleasant it could be. Then, his brain actually kicked into action. There was no wildlife around, as hardly any animal could live in such harsh conditions. There also wasn't any village nearby, the closest one being on the other side of the cave, which was miles long. The cave. Izuku ran to it, heart pumping. Despite it being pitch black and consisting of many twists and turns, from what Sensei had told him, anyway, there was always a possibility of someone managing to stumble to the end. He turned to enter before stopping, the smell of strong iron making bile rise to his throat. He looked around, but all he could see was black. Gritting his teeth, he braced himself, slowly making his way into the black cavern. Cool air nipped his skin, and he did his best to suppress a shiver as the smell got stronger. Making sure to take in short, quick breaths, as to not agitate his stomach anymore, his feet hit something with a splash. He looked down, eyes having adjusted slightly to the dark, to see a bit of color on the gray floor. Blood. Despite barely able to see the red substance, he knew there was nothing else it could be. So he must be close to whatever was causing such a mess. Izuku looked around, taking a few cautious steps forward before his foot brushed against something solid. His eyes shifted down to see pale skin, slightly illuminated. How he'll never know. He took a moment to think it over. It could be potentially dangerous, as they were a stranger, and could possibly turn on them. But, if they were beaten so badly that they escaped to the cave, where no one had gone through successfully before succumbing to their untimely death, while bleeding this heavily, it was a risk he was willing to wager. So, he carefully searched around before grabbed what he assumed was an arm, mounting it over his shoulder, gingerly lifting the body to its feet. Izuku nearly toppled over himself. The person was much bigger than he was. He glanced at their face, but, to no surprise, he wasn't able to make anything out. Guess he'll just have to wait until they got out. Luckily, whoever it was just a few feet from the entrance before they collapsed. He began to drag them out, grunting quietly under the added weight. Upon making it out, he glanced at the person once again. A stitched face greeted him, the lower half looking painful as purple stitches went down to just above the chest. Under their eyes were stitches as well. What on earth happened to them? Raven black hair nearly struck his eye, as it jetted out every which way, dirt and drying blood coating it. Examining the face once more, he concluded that the person was male, and looked slightly older than Izuku. Not only that, but they seemed to have had a rough time. Torn and dirted clothes clung to his frail body with their last shred of life, no shoes to be seen anywhere. One of his legs looked awkward, bending out slightly at a weird angle, signaling to Izuku that it was broken. Deep cuts marred his pale skin, tidbits of blood oozing out from them, as they were still quite fresh. Deep bruises danced across where the cuts failed to connect to. Whatever this man had went through was clearly rough. Izuku grunted and adjusted him before carrying on, taking quick note of how their body had cooled dangerously. He needed help, stat. He went as fast as he could while being careful not to disturb the other as much as he could. Upon making it to the door, he didn't even bother to knock as he kicked it open, dragging the man after him. He'll apologize to Kurojiri later. Izuku hurried to his room. While they had more rooms, he didn't quite trust to leave the man in one of them, as the other occupants of the house might not take too kindly to it, and laid the man down, taking a quick look over at him. He winced slightly at how beaten and broken the other looked, their breath shallow and quick. At least he's still alive, Izuku thought to himself before getting up. While he himself had no idea how to treat such severe wounds, he knew who did. He just silently prayed the other would be willing to listen. Izuku hurried out, not wanting to waste a second, as every second counted down to the man's death if left untreated. Kurojiri! He yelled, looking around, checking each room he passed. Kurojiri! I'm here, child, the man said from his bar at the front of the room. While it wasn't necessary, old habits died hard. He'd asked Sensei to make him a bar so he could keep himself occupied with cleaning glasses. Izuku smiled, running up to him. Thank God you're here. Kurojiri, can you dash? Izuku, what in the world happened to you? He cut in, wide eyes staring at the child. He frowned in confusion and looked down at himself. He was stained with blood and had dragged a thin trail of blood in when he brought the man in. He shook his head. "That doesn't matter right now. That doesn't matter," he said hastily. "Kurogyari, I need your help." "Of course." The other replied quickly, worried for the boy in front of him. "What's wrong?" "Come with me," he replied, running back to his room. Worry and confusion flooded Kurogyari's mind as he followed, even jogging lightly. Once the man entered the room, his eyes widened at what he saw. A stranger lay on Izuku's bed, who looked ready to panic at any moment. While he was curious, he knew the man wouldn't survive long with those wounds. He rushed to their side, glancing him over. "Izuku, get me my medical kit from my room." The boy nodded and hurried off. Kurogyari stripped the stranger of their shirt, eyes narrowing as he saw a rather large hole at the bottom left of the person's stomach. Some muscle was able to be seen, the pink body part convulsing and contracting. A minute later Izuku returned, kit in hand as well as a few extra things from the bathroom. Kurogyari smiled slightly at the boy's forethought before shooing him out. He turned back to the body in front of him, opening the kit quickly. He had work to do. Hours passed and Izuku grew frantic, pacing the living room with ceaseless worry. He knew he shouldn't, that Kurogyari knew what he was doing and would help the other, but his mind would not settle down. While he had no problems killing others and seeing someone get killed, he just couldn't let that happen to that man. He opted to save him after all. What kind of heartless, useless person would he be if he couldn't even save someone he went out of his way to? Tamura had entered around an hour after. Kurogyari kicked him out of his room, watching with slight interest as Izuku continued to walk back and forth. "Mind telling me what's got you so wired up?" "I found someone in the cave," he said without thinking, too worried to be bothered. That caught the elder's attention, making him bolt upward from his laying position to stare at Izuku in shock. "You did what now?" Izuku sighed, rubbing his temples. "I said I found someone in the cave. They were unconscious and bleeding badly, so I opted to bring them here to help." "Since when did you care about others?" Tamura sneered, an unknown emotion slipping into his words. The boy had no time or patience to figure it out, though. "I don't know," he admitted, stopping to look at the other. "I honestly don't know, but I just couldn't leave them there." Before the white-haired teen could reply, Kurogyari entered, looking more tired than usual. Izuku rushed up to him. "How is he? Is he going to be all right?" Kurogyari held up a hand. "Calm down, Izuku. I did the best I could, but I can't be absolutely certain that he will make it. Since Sensei won't be back for a few months, we'll just have to wait and see how things turn out." That did little to calm the boy down as he just got more nervous. "Oh no. We can't let that happen. I brought him here, I can't have him dying now." Speaking of which, the man interjected, eyeing Izuku. "Where did you even find him?" "He said he found him in the cave." Tamura said, eyes never leaving the green-haired child. "Cave? Izuku, I thought I told you dash." "I know." Izuku snapped, surprising them both. Rarely did the boy snap, and hardly ever at them. "But I smelt the strong stench of iron, and I found him just lying there, bleeding out. I felt like I needed to help somehow." Kurogyari stayed silent, eyes softening. No matter what, Izuku was still the kind child he had first met at heart, wanting to save those who were hurt and in danger no matter what the consequence was. Tamura seemed to have the same thought process, as he just simply scoffed and laid back down. "All right, we'll help him," he told Izuku, who visibly relaxed. "We don't know if he'll survive, but we'll try our best to increase our odds." The boy nodded happily, giving the man an angelic smile. "Thank you, Kurogyari." All he could do was chuckle and shake his head. This child was going to be the end of him. A month passed before the man opened his eyes, which was a great sign of improvement. His wounds had begun to heal over and the bruises began to fade. Kurogyari had to manually fix the leg, as if he didn't, it wouldn't heal properly. Once the man awoke, Kurogyari tried to get him to speak and eat, to which both were completely ignored. He sighed. Seems like another troublesome one had joined them. He left the room one day to be greeted with a nervous Izuku. "Is he up?" Kurogyari nodded. Yes, but he refuses to eat or speak. If he continues this way, we might have to force-feed him to keep him alive. See, can I try to talk to him? The boy asked shyly, shuffling his feet. A laugh left Kurogyari. This child was just too precious. He even let the man have his room, declining both Kurogyari and Tamura's offering of taking the man to a different room. I'll just sleep in a different room. He needs his rest, was all the boy said. All right, but just for a little bit. Izuku smiled brightly, nodding, and rushed past the man excitedly. He shook his head, fond amusement in his golden eyes as he walked away. What troublesome children he has. Izuku entered the room cautiously, green eyes peeking out from behind the door. The man sat up in bed, looking out the window, staring at the falling snow with a blank face. He swallowed before forcing himself in, causing the man to glance at him. The boy flinched under his gaze, but found himself drawn to his eyes. Blue. Not just any blue, a bright, blinding blue, a color that even the sky itself couldn't replicate. He got caught up in the stranger's eyes for a bit before pulling himself back to reality. The man stared at him, and while his face remained blank, he could see the confusion and curiosity in his eyes. He laughed, embarrassed, rubbing the back of his neck shyly. Sorry about that, he said, walking up to the other. Your eyes are really pretty. No response. Izuku wasn't surprised, he didn't expect one. So, he just had a one-sided conversation. He was good at those. It's pretty outside, isn't it? He said, noticing that the man's gaze went back to the window. He was met with more silence. He smiled, unfazed. I saw snow for the first time 8 years ago, you know? I was really surprised. I had only read about it in books I got from Yagi-san, after all. Silence. I was surprised when I felt how cold it was. Those books really did it no justice. It's much prettier and colder than what they said it was. But that just made me even happier, to be able to experience something I had only read about. Speaking of which, I had meat for the first time 8 years ago as well. Kurogyari and Murakami were really surprised when I said I'd never eaten meat before. You should have seen the looks on their faces. Even Sensei was surprised. He caught a boar in a different country even so that I could try some. It was really good. Where I used to live, warm food was a rarity and really valuable. Me and my mom lived off fruits mostly, but I didn't mind. Fruits were yummy. We even had soup when Yagi-san came over. He continued his pointless conversations, unaware that the man had turned his eyes from the window to him at some point. Did you know that there used to be a forest here as well? Well, that was before Izuku coughed, an embarrassed flush crossing his cheeks as he rubbed the back of his neck. I accidentally destroyed it? Anyway, how in the world did you manage to destroy an entire forest on accident? The sudden interruption caught Izuku off guard, nearly biting his tongue in surprise. The man stared at Izuku with blank bemusement, looking as if he didn't believe a word the boy said. That didn't bother him. Instead, he smiled widely. It was from my magic. I didn't really know how to control it, so I kinda overdid it and chopped down a whole forest, he admitted shyly. Even then, magic shouldn't be powerful enough to do something like that. Sensei said I have the strongest magic in the world. And he's been literally everywhere, so I know he's telling the truth. What if he's just lying to you, to get you to trust him? Sensei wouldn't do that. Izuku pouted. He's very kind and nice and took me in when I had nowhere else to go. This caught the man by surprise, eyes widening slightly. He looked away. What do you mean? I mean what I said. Izuku stated, shrugging. I used to live in this forest by a village, where I wasn't allowed to go. My mom told me not to. So, one day when I was 4, I went exploring and found a fire dragon in a cave. Cue blue eyes returning to the boy. Not only that, but the dragon had a human child. Well, not literally, he was kinda adopted. Anyway, that's where I met my first friend, Kaken. He's kind of a hothead and cusses a lot, but he's really nice once you get to know him. He even had magic where he could create explosions from his hands. It was super cool. Anyways, one day, Kaken took me out of the forest and to the village. I know I was going against what Mom wanted, but I was just super curious. I wanted to know more about the things I only read in books. Once I entered the town, I was blown away. There were so many people there, living, breathing people. I was so excited that I got separated from Kaken at some point. But I don't really regret it, 'cause I got to meet Murakan and Kurogiri and Sensei because of that. I found Murakan all beaten and bloody, so I tried to call out for help, but no one would listen. I was confused. Weren't people supposed to help each other? In my books, the knight always saved the princess no matter what. I mean, sure, Murakan wasn't a princess, but he still needed help. That's when Kurogiri came up and carried him back to their place. How was he able to do that with no visible muscle? Izuku laughed. I'm not sure either. Anyways, he carried Murakan back and cleaned him up. He helped you too, by the way. So, worried for Murakan, I went to visit him the next day, and that's when I found out about my powers. The boy went quiet, surprising the other. A group of men came in and attacked us while I was visiting. And Murakan had just woken up that day too. It was bad. They attacked us and I was so scared. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't protect the only people who were nice to me. But once I saw Murakan laying down on the floor, a puddle of his own blood surrounding him, something inside me snapped. I don't really remember what exactly happened, but I remembering feeling a strong power flow through me, ripping the men to pieces. Kurogiri was the one to calm me down. He frowned, liking his lips. I know I probably should, but I don't regret killing those men. They were hurting those I cared about. Of course I couldn't take that laying down. That's when I met Sensei. He'd come back from traveling and healed Murakan. Don't worry, once he's back, we'll make sure he heals you properly too. He was the one to discover the potential of my power, and even offered to teach me then and there. I couldn't just go with him, though. I had Mom and Kaken waiting for me back home. So, I declined, but I promised to meet Murakan every day after that. As weeks passed by, I thought my life had gone back to normal, but that wasn't the case. One day, someone from the village followed me home and set it on fire. Mom was knocked unconscious just before, so she couldn't do anything to stop it. I rushed inside and tried to wake her up before I fell unconscious as well. The next day, I woke to my mom's worried shaking. Luckily it started raining when it did, or we'd both be dead. Anyway, Kaken also came over and worried over us in his own way, and that's when I asked Mom the real reason why we weren't allowed into town. That's when she told me the story of how my dad tried to kill me, and how she fled to keep us safe. While that was happening, a mob of townspeople came and attacked us. We fled the room through the window, where we ran to Ignis. Ignis-san is the fire dragon, by the way. Anyway, we ran to Ignis-san, who had come to help us. I asked him to take Mom and Kaken somewhere safe, telling him I had somewhere else to go. He agreed and left with the two on his back while I ran back to town. There, I met Kurogiri and Sensei in their house, and accepted his offer from before. Of course, the only condition was for me to travel with them, which I agreed to as well. So, long story short, that's how I ended up here. He finished, smiling. The man stared at him in silenced awe. He cleared his throat. Why are you telling me all this? For all you know, I could be someone here to harm you. I know. That answer caused the man to flinch, shocked. Izuku simply stared at him with calm, unwavering eyes. But I couldn't just leave you there. I'd be no better than the people of that village. I'd be no better than those that claim to be human just because they look the part. He stared at the child quietly. He knew that the other wasn't lying. Their green eyes shone with silent determination and hatred for humanity. I'm Izuku. The boy chirped suddenly. Midoriya Izuku. What's your name? The other blinked slowly. Dabi. Izuku flashed him his signature angelic smile. Nice to meet you, Dabi-san. Just Dabi's fine. Okay, Dabi. Dabi blushed slightly, looking away. Izuku hopped closer to him, glancing at the bedside table, and yelled out in surprise. You haven't eaten yet? Kurogiri's food is to die for. The boy picked the plate up, picking up a fork and scooping up a few green beans on it. Here, I'll feed you. Say, I can do it myself. The other snapped, no actual bite in his words as he snatched the plate from the other. Izuku giggled before sitting on the chair next to the bed. Kurogiri stood behind his counter, listening to Izuku's upbeat voice and a deeper, more tired voice replying every once in a while. He simply shook his head, setting the newly cleaned glass in his hand down. That boy will forever be a mystery to him. Muriken, you but if dash, give me it back. Well, that was something Dabi didn't expect to wake up to that morning. Groggily opening his eyes, quite annoyed to be awoken by someone yelling, he sat up, rubbing the back of his neck. He growled, swinging his feet off the bed, his feet touching the cold, hard ground, sending a shiver down his spine. With an agitated huff he got up, quickly getting dressed. He spared a glance at the window, noting how the sun had barely begun to rise. Whoever had woken him up were going to get there but beat. He threw a coat on and trudged out of his room, footsteps heavy as he hadn't completely gotten the sleep out of his system. His black hair was more of a mess than usual, which he'd adamantly deny. It was called style, thank you very much. While he wasn't physically able to show bags under his eyes, thanks to the stitches, the fact that he was bone-tired was evident. His eyes were glossed over and he was sluggish in his movements. Throwing the door open, he was met with the usual sight, Tamura running around, hogging Izuku's snack, which the young boy made quite clear that he hated sharing, as the one mentioned gave chase, a murderous glint in his eyes. Kurogiri simply stood behind his counter as per usual, cleaning a glass that most likely hadn't even been used. Irritation bubbled under the raven-haired teen's skin, grating on his nerves more than usual. Will you two shut the F up? He snapped, growling. Both stopped and turned to look at him. Red eyes rolled while small lips pouted. Dabi grunted, pushing past them two to slouch on the couch. While still tired, he doubted he'd be able to go back to sleep now. Especially not after having just snapped at the two most rambunctious people in the cabin. The two seemed to have gotten the message though, as Tamura made himself comfortable in a chair a bit a ways away while Izuku plopped down next to Dabi, laying the older boy's head in his lap and began to hum a comforting tune to help relax the other. He made a quiet noise in the back of his throat, closing his eyes, basking in the smaller boy's warmth. He'd never admit aloud, but he had grown to like the other three. He'd been with them for a little over 3 months, and they'd never shown signs of abandoning him or even harming him in any way, shape, or form. They were kind, and he was afraid of that. Afraid they'd eventually turn on him, just like the others did. However, after spending time with the trio, Dabi couldn't find any hidden malice in their actions. While Tamura was childish and threw temper tantrums at random, he never lied, always saying what was on his mind. He and Kurogiri never really talked much, but he noticed that the man was quite motherly and Dabi wasn't used to it. The man would worry over him when he overexerted himself and got injuries, to which Dabi would just silently brush off but let the other help anyway. It was strange to say the least. When he first woke up a month after the day he was found, he was confused and anxious. How did he end up here? Where was he? How did I survive? He refused to eat or converse with Kurogiri, who was presumably the one in charge of caring for him. He didn't care. No one cared about him, so why would now be any different? That man was just probably trying to be polite so he could stab me in the back later, he mused, not even giving the food the other left him a second glance as he looked out the bedroom window. It went on like that for days, Dabi ignoring Kurogiri placing food at his bedside table and leaving after having checked up on the other's wounds. All he did was stare out the window, watching the snow fall slowly down onto the white blanket beneath. However, one day, when Kurogiri left after having just leaving the food for him, he heard the other talking to someone outside the door. He couldn't exactly hear what they were saying, but the other voice was a bit high-pitched though still noticeably male. After the two stopped talking, Dabi heard the door creak open, but didn't bother to look to see who it was. Whoever it was didn't matter. He knew he'd get thrown out to survive on his own soon anyway. He heard quiet shuffling to which he finally bit and looked at whoever entered. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. It was a young teen, possibly a few years younger than himself, who had the most unruly hair he'd ever seen with the most innocent green eyes even a child wouldn't be able to replicate. He quickly wiped the look off his face to replace it with his normal blank stare. He didn't want anyone to take advantage of his emotions ever again. Their eyes locked, and the other seemed to tense up, going speechless. After a few moments of silence, the boy stuttered out an apology, but Dobby didn't care. He turned his gaze back to the window, letting what the other said go in one ear and out the other, not really paying attention. However, when the younger mentioned something about destroying a whole forest, and by accident, he couldn't help but butt in. Getting a laugh out of the green-haired teen wasn't what he had planned, but he didn't hate it. The laugh sounded kind of cute. Another thing the older teen didn't expect was for the boy to just spill out his whole life story to him, a stranger and potential threat to him and everyone else who lived here. After voicing those thoughts, he was met with a sincere, "I know." Dobby flinched at the answer, surprise making its way into his expression. He stared into green eyes, looking for any sort of lie, any sort of malice. But he found none. The boy was telling the truth. The other decided to surprise him once again by just suddenly introducing himself, even asking for his name in return. Dobby told him, but to this day he'll admit he didn't know why. He couldn't trust them, they could hurt him, just like they did, but there was something about Izuku he couldn't distrust. That was the day he met the one named Izuku, a mystery he planned to solve. Dobby swore he hated them. No matter what anyone says, he hated them. Or at least he tried to. He glared at Izuku, snow splattered on his face courtesy of a snowball being thrown at him. The younger laughed, clutching his stomach and doubling over. He growled and wiped the snow off, blue flames liking the falling frozen water as it fell, melting it. Tamura joined in the laughing, standing a bit further away. Kurojairi just shook his head, sighing at their antics. "You a-hole." Dobby hissed, murderous gaze never leaving the laughing boy. "It's a good look on you." Izuku managed to get out between fits of laughter, wiping tears from his eyes. Before he could retaliate by throwing a snowball of his own, a portal opened and a tall man walked out, brushing off something from his black suit. He looked around, gaze looking over everyone there. Kurojairi bowed politely while Tamura and Izuku straightened up. Dobby simply looked at the man with a bored expression. He'd never personally met this sensei person, but Izuku and the other two held him in high regard, so whoever he was he must be a strong person. "I see everyone's ready to leave." The newcomer simply stated. "Of course," Kurojairi said. "We're prepared to go wherever you wish to take us." Sensei nodded, finally turning his head to Dobby. "And you must be Dobby. I've heard a lot about you from young Izuku here." The one mentioned blushed while Dobby just shrugged. "I could say the same about you." "So, Dobby," the other continued, ignoring his statement, which irked him a bit. "Do you truly wish to join us and fight for our cause?" The teen shrugged again, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've got nothing better to do. And besides," his eyes grew cold, his lips thinning into a tight line. "I know how fed up the world's become. I don't want any part of that." "I see," Sensei hummed before simply opening a new portal. "Well, welcome then. I expect you to not betray us." Dobby said nothing, just following the group through the portal. After passing, he felt slightly tipsy, having to adjust himself to the ground slightly before being able to stand steadily. "I guess that's going to happen every time," he thought, sighing. How troublesome. They stood in front of a small village, few people walking about and talking chipperly. He frowned, pulling his lips back in a grimace. "Hey, you okay?" A voice whispered to him. He glanced at Izuku. "I'm fine," he replied tightly. If you say so, he was glad the other didn't push it. He didn't want to talk about it. "We're starting our journey here," Sensei explained, eyes never leaving the village. "We shall destroy this village and make our mark on the world known." He glanced at Dobby. "I heard that you have fire powers, correct?" A nod. "Well, then I want you to start a fire. Make sure no house is left standing." The teen nodded, blue flames erupting from his hand as he held it out. Without hesitance, he shot it out, lighting everything in sight on fire. Screams bellowed out, people running and screaming in panic. Wide eyes of disbelief and betrayal as they tried to get their friends and family to safety. Kurojairi, Tamura, Izuku, Sensei called to them, their eyes turning to their leader. Make sure no one makes it out alive. The three nod and get to work, Dabi following to make sure nothing was left intact. Izuku made his way to a child crying out for their mother. He smiled gently, holding a hand in front of the child's face. Sorry, you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. A cry was cut off as Dabi burnt a symbol into the ground below, face blank and expressionless to the ground around him. He finished, huffing and looking up. They were the League of Villains, and they were on the move.